I didn't like you when we first met because the way you held back your true self. But now I realize it was your vulnerability that made you who you are. When we first met, your walls seemed too high to climb. But with time, I discovered that underneath them was a heart I could never forget. At first, your words felt cold and distant, but now I understand that you were just afraid to open up. I see you, and I understand. I didn't like the way you seemed so distant when we first met, but now I see that it was your way of protecting yourself. The first time we crossed paths, I thought you were guarded, but I now know it was just your way of keeping your real self hidden from the world. Your silence when we first met left me puzzled, but now I understand that sometimes silence speaks more than words ever could. When we first met, I didn't like how you always looked at the floor. Now, I see it was because you were learning to stand tall in your own skin. At first, I couldn't understand your indifference, but now I realize that it was your way of keeping your emotions under control. When we first met, I was put off by your quiet demeanor, but I've come to see it as a sign of your strength and patience. I didn't like you at first because you seemed to push everyone away, but now I realize you were just protecting yourself from getting hurt. The way you avoided eye contact when we met initially made me feel invisible, but now I see it was your way of hiding your true emotions. I didn't like the way you always seemed so calm when we met, but now I realize it was your inner peace that attracted me in the end. At first, your seriousness felt overwhelming, but I now see it as your way of finding balance in a chaotic world. When we first met, I didn't like the way you held back your feelings, but now I see how carefully you choose to share them. I didn't understand your coldness when we first met, but now I realize that it was simply your way of building trust slowly. When we first crossed paths, your distant attitude made me question everything, but now I understand it was just your way of testing the waters. I didn't like the way you didn't smile when we first met, but now I see that your smile is something earned through time and trust. At first, I was frustrated by how you never come to open up, but now I see that your silence spoke volumes. I didn't like you when we first met because you always seemed so aloof, but now I realize you were just figuring out if I was worth your time. The way you avoided deep conversations when we met first frustrated me, but now I understand that you were giving yourself time to trust. When we first met, I didn't like how you kept your distance, but now I see that you were just trying to figure out who I really was. I didn't like the way you ignored my attempts at friendship when we met, but now I understand that you were protecting your peace. At first, I found it hard to connect with you because you were so focused, but now I realize it was your determination that made you so special. I didn't like you when we first met because of how quiet you were, but now I realize that your silence holds more meaning than words ever could. The way you kept your emotions guarded when we first met frustrated me, but now I understand it was your way of showing strength. I didn't like you when we first met because you were so focused on your goals, but now I see that determination is something I admire. When we first met, I didn't understand your need for space, but now I realize how important it is to honor each other's boundaries. I didn't like how you always seemed so distant when we first met, but now I realize that you just needed time to trust me. The first time we met, I couldn't understand why you were so reserved, but now I realize that your quiet nature holds great depth. I didn't like you when we first met because of how serious you were, but now I see that seriousness means you're someone who values what truly matters. When we first met, I didn't like how you kept your thoughts to yourself, but now I know that you share them when it truly counts. I didn't like how you were always so protective of yourself when we first met, but now I realize that you were just learning how to trust me. At first, I didn't understand your hesitance to open up, but now I see that you needed time to let your guard down. I didn't like the way you dismissed my thoughts when we first met, but now I see that you were just waiting for me to understand your perspective. I didn't like how you seemed indifferent when we first met, but now I see that it was just your way of keeping your emotions in check. At first, your silence frustrated me, but now I see that sometimes silence is a deeper connection than words could ever express.